I probably should take down this Christmas lights behind me, but that's not why you're here, right? You're here to learn about creating some tabletop game terrain with Blender. Welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Last time in this series we worked on these pipelines here in Blender and created those for your battlefield. Today we've got a separate independent project. We're making this blast shield right here for your infantry to guard the mining station we're building in this series. Now this is a bunch of mesh manipulation, tongue twister there. So we're moving vertices around, merging them together, and having fun with the mirror modifier. You also saw this guy right here in the intro picture. And well, this guy, we're not making him directly, but if you're interested in the STL files for this defensive barrier as well as the pipelines, you can buy those over on my Etsy store, a link in the show notes of this video. So let's get Blender open and dive into this process. Well, here we are inside of Blender. I got my reference image loaded in, and the hero of the day is the default Blender cube. So let's zoom in on that guy. Whoopsie daisy. Let's really zoom in on that guy. In all seriousness, what I'm doing here with this shape is actually fairly basic, and I can build it off a simple Blender cube. I am going to change the sizing a little bit now that I think about it. The numbers I punched in here are a little small, but what I'm going to do is build half the shape first. So let me just go over here with my little cube selected, press N to bring up our sizes. Okay, let's do 35 millimeters wide by 50 millimeters tall. So I'm going to punch in half the width, 17. And then for tall, I just said, what, 50? That sounds like what I just said. Except that that is not how tall things are. Let's make this guy instead be the depth, which will be 6 millimeters. That's too much, 5. Alright, 50 here. Now this shape here is pretty much, you want to add an extra vertice and then just kind of indent the top one by a certain distance. Pretty simple, right? So let's jump to edit mode, press tab. Let's go into wireframe mode. I'm going to box select, letter B. These guys over here, these two sets of vertices. And I am going to choose right click, subdivide. And that's going to add a new set of vertices right down here. So I highlight those. I can press G and then Z to move them up somewhere to, I don't know. I want this, so this thing is 50 millimeters tall. And I want the angle to connect to the top of the barriers, which are still going to be kind of short. So let me go down here. And I can just quickly count some squares up. And about 20 millimeters up from the bottom. Now there are tools in Blender like Measure It, which you can use to exactly measure things, but I don't really need to go through that whole process just for this. And then I can box select these top vertices, press G, lock them to the X axis, and move it in a little bit to get that kind of blast shield looking shape. And to be honest with you, that's a good portion of what we have to do today. It's a lot of just doing some modifiers, stacking things from here. But I will show you how to do that as well. Alright. Now, at some point we're going to be playing around with the mirror modifier. So what I need to do, I talked a little bit about this in the first episode of this series. This orange dot here is kind of like the center of the object. So what I'm going to do in edit mode, select everything, press G and X, and I'm going to move this thing off to the left until this orange center dot is lined up with the inside of the wall. That'll be important later on. It doesn't have to be super perfect. In fact, it might not be a bad idea to put the wall a little bit to the left of the orange dot. What I have to do next is I've got two more of these shapes. We have like an inside outset shape here. And then I've got this little indent that's also the same kind of shape. So let me jump up to the top view here. Let's duplicate this object. So Shift D, press Y to move it out. We'll jump back into our front view here. I'm going to scale it along the Z axis and then we'll move it down so it's a little too much. There we go, kind of like that. And then I also want to now scale it along the X axis a little bit because it's inset from the edge of the blast shield there, and then we'll move it so it's pretty much aligned with the center. So that's kind of like the shape we're going for. I want to take all these vertices over here then, so select all the vertices along the right of both of the meshes. And we're going to do our favorite scale X0 trick. So now we've aligned all those vertices in a nice, neat vertical line. Same thing with the bottom, but we got to do scale Z0. So now those vertices are nice and neatly aligned. And if I go to solid mode here, I can kind of see, okay, that's what I'm going for at the moment. However, this front piece here its front face is a little bit smaller than the back. So to accomplish that, I need to select the front couple of vertices like this, and do the same process we just did. So the entire face is selected, scale them in the Z direction a little bit, and then drag them down, and then we'll line them up in a moment. And then scale them in the X direction a bit, and then shift it over to the right. Then we'll align those in just a moment as well. So once again, jump back to wireframe mode. That part is important because in wireframe mode, you can select all the vertices, even the ones behind the ones you can't see. If you're in solid mode here, you're only going to, by default anyway, you're only going to select the vertices that you can see. The ones behind you can't select. And that's an important distinction. If you run into weird things, then maybe that's what's happening. So align these, scale X0, same thing at the bottom, scale for S for scale, Z0. And now we've got something that's looking, that's definitely closer to what we wanted to have. A weird side effect of how I did the subdivide, we've got this extra line right here, which frankly, I shouldn't have done it that way, but I'll show you how to clean that up. We're going to go into face select mode. And I want to select these side faces right here. Let's start by press X for delete, then choose faces. I am also going to go ahead and delete that vertice right there. And then I'm going to select these 4 vertices, press F to make a new face. Down here, I am going to do something similar. I'm going to delete this vertice, which will delete all those faces. I'm also going to delete that vertice at the bottom there. So I'm really hacking things to pieces because, well, this is what happens when you do things wrong. You have to start hacking things to pieces. So, okay, now I got to rebuild these faces. So I'm just going to select 4 vertices at a time. Press F, build the face. And then repeat that process. And I've got the look I want, but I don't have the weird issues because there's that middle line in the mesh. Now this is a good time to do the magic method of pressing A to select everything, then Shift N to recalculate normals to the outside. Once again, it's eternal Blender math stuff. Okay, so now what I need to do is create this indent that's in here. So let's tab back into object mode. And what I'm going to do is create a new mesh. Once again, it's just going to be a cube. I'm going to scale it up to about the size of that indent, so it's pretty close to the height of this particular intersection here. That's probably pretty good height-wise. And you do want to have it extend a little bit below the bottom of this piece, as well as a little bit to the right of this piece. Now let's scale it along the x-axis. And I need to, once again, go into edit mode and add that little corner. The other way you can do it is I'm going to go ahead and do Control R for a loop cut. We'll put that there. And then I will drag it so it's like, I don't know, something like that looks pretty good. Then we'll move this guy in. I think that's about what I expect. Now what I need to do is we can go from a, that's not what I want to see. But I want to see it from some kind of weird angle like this. And then I can press G and Y to move it out and scale it in the Y direction. And the depth that it intersects with our previous object is how far it's going to cut into that object. And that looks like a pretty good depth to me, but it's kind of up to you what you want. And just like with the bottom and the side, you want to make sure that it's extruding out the front. Because the operation we're about to do is called a Boolean operation. And if it's not sticking out of the mesh in all dimensions, you're going to get a different result than what you expect. Maybe you want that sometimes, but in this case where I'm trying to cut like a half inset in here, I don't want that. Alright, so let me give this guy a name. So let's click on an object properties over on the right hand side, this little box with 4 little corner things around it. Let's call this the indent. And then this guy here is going to be main blast shield. I just clicked on the old blast shield and I gave it a name. And we're going to work with a modifier now. So with the main blast shield selected, we're going to go to the modifiers tab. We're going to choose add modifier boolean. Operation is difference, which is a mathematical subtraction of 3D objects. So I'm basically saying take this main blast shield object and subtract a shape from it, which the only other object we can choose from is going to be indent. If I jump to wireframe mode, you can kind of see now how there's a little bit of an indent cut in the front of the blast shield, which is what we want. That's awesome. Let's hit apply over here. And then this guy right here, I can left click on that, press H to hide. I don't need it anymore. And you can see I've got my indent. 2 more things we got to do with this object before we get to the whole fun with, what do we call it? Mirror modifiers, we'll say. So let's jump back into edit mode. And I need to add this little triangle extruded thing that I've got marked on the blast shield like that. So that's going to be another mesh. So let's do Shift A, cube. That is, I believe, 2 millimeters right there, which is probably a little thin. So I'm going to make it a little bit wider. We'll scale it in the Z direction. A little too much, a little bit shorter than that. Then, yep, I need to move it so it's at the front of my object, so that's good like that. And I am going to take these 2 bottom vertices, move them out further, and then I'm going to take these 2 top vertices that are sticking out and move them in a little bit. So you've got something that's like a bit of a triangle shape like that. And then what we have to do before, select all of our bottom vertices, S for scale, Z, and then 0 to align them all together. And what I want to do, even though it's not really shown on my reference images, I want to rotate this thing back just a little bit, kind of lean it back, like it's angling back. Not by much, but just by a little bit. So let me jump to a side view here. Press R for rotate. Let's do something like that. Of course, now our bottom is not flat to the ground, so let's fix that. We're going to select all those bottom vertices. And what do you know? Scale, Z0. Hey, look at that. It's really a magical operation. It's incredible. Okay. Now if we go to solid mode, yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now you've got a piece of a blast shield that a miniature would be hiding behind. Now, how I'm envisioning this thing is going to go is you've got blast shield, wall connector, blast shield, and then like another wall connector. And it's kind of spread out like that. So this is like a symmetrical thing. So same thing over here. Here's the main blast shield, blast shield, wall. So what I need to do is, because I need to do a mirror modifier on just this one piece, because I have a symmetrical blast shield here and here. So I'm in object mode. We're going to do Shift D and then drag it up Z. So I've now got 2 copies of my blast shield here. With our new copy, we're going to go over to our modifiers properties over here, choose add modifier, and go to mirror. Now by default, you'll probably get something that looks about right, as long as you've been following along with how I've had things oriented along the X, Y, and Z axis. If not, you might have to fiddle with these 3 buttons right here. But now, what you'll notice, if I zoom in, there's a gap in the middle. And that is from the fact early on when I kind of positioned the thing off to the left a little bit. So let's fix that. And here's how that's going to go. There's an option here for clipping. So let me choose clipping. And then I'm going to go into edit mode, wireframe, and select everything. Now I'm going to press G and X and move it slowly to the right. And as I move it to the right, its mirror half gets closer from the left, or moves to the left, right? And at some point, they're going to meet each other and not move any further. Because that's what clipping does. It basically moves everything to the center and stops them right there. So now, if I go back to object mode in solid, you effectively have a single piece. But there are a few more things that we need to play around with before I can call this one solid object. So jump back into edit mode by pressing tab. And we're going to go to face select mode. There are internal faces here because what we had before was a solid object. This is a face running down the middle of the object. You want to delete that one, so press X and then choose faces. And then there's going to be there's at least one more internal face here to delete. Now, we're deleting that because that can cause issues with some slicer programs. The rest of the stuff should be fine to leave. And then what we need to make sure, though, I think we're good, is make sure that merge is turned on. And I'm going to bump the merge limit up to 0.1. That shouldn't affect anything because we're building a relatively large model. But what I basically just said is any vertices that are within 0.1 millimeters of each other, merge them together. And that's mainly to make sure that the vertices that got clipped together here down the middle are all merged together. Okay. That is the mirror modifier, first part. Let's press apply to apply that. So now what I need to do is move this guy over here at some point and set him off to the side. So I need to line this guy back up with this one. So this guy down here, we have a Z of 0. Let's left click on our copy. We're going to give it a Z. Oh, wait. What? Oh, Z of 0, yes. So now they're directly on top of each other. I'm going to press G and then X. And let's move them over this way so that I want about 35 millimeters or so between these pieces. So you got a typical miniature these days can shoot out. Now what I'm going to do is make a small version of this and have it connect these two halves together. But before I do that, if you look at my reference image, I want this thing rotated. So it's not a line, it's kind of like a concave object. So let's press 7 to jump to the top view. With our copy selected, I'm going to rotate that. Oh, I don't know. Let's go 20 degrees. Not 20 degrees, minus 20 degrees because we're on this side. And then I want to scale, I want to put it somewhere around here. Once again, so it looks like they're about 35 millimeters apart. In fact, I'm going to make this minus 30 degrees, so a little bit more. Alright, that's cool there. Now I'm going to make the connector piece. So I'm going to actually take my copy here. Let's duplicate that, Shift D, and kind of approximately move it to where it should. We're going to set its rotation to minus 15, so it's kind of splitting the difference a little bit. And then I'm going to position it, oh, I don't know, approximately about where I think it should be. Let me jump to the front view. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into edit mode. What I want to do is kind of scale the top half of this piece down, but I have to do it basically piecemeal or weird things might happen. So I'm going to box select the top of the indent section, do S and then Z. You already can see something kind of strange happening. This little thing I'm highlighting right here, that is something's going wrong with your mesh. Basically, the geometry is causing some non-real thing to occur and Blender doesn't quite know how to render it. If I jump into solid mode, you can't see much right now, but if it got worse, you probably could. So all you really got to do is reposition your vertices a little bit and that should go away. If it doesn't, you got a more serious problem with the structure of your mesh and you're going beyond this tutorial. You're getting into more advanced Blender territory. Okay, so I'm going to keep bringing these down quite a bit. I'm going to also move these little triangle things down a bit. I'm going to repeat the process up here. So what I can do is just grab these guys and let's bring them down a fair bit. And then same thing with the top. So now if I go to solid mode, what I kind of got is a stubby version of what I just built, and that's looking pretty good. Now I need one more of these things, right? Because it's going to go blast shield, wall. So I need to duplicate this one. This guy's at 30, so I'm going to rotate this to -45. And I'm going to position this somewhere right there at the moment. So once again, you can see you've got blast shield, wall, blast shield, wall. So now we need to start getting ready to connect all these together. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of move these guys off the side a little bit. How I'm going to start this is I want to position each of these so that the two inside corners on the top here are basically touching each other. So let me go into wireframe mode and move only along the X and Y axes when you're doing this. And you want to try to get those corners to overlap about as close as you possibly can. Doesn't have to be perfect, just got to be pretty darn close. Like that's good enough. And we're going to repeat the process with these two. Okay, so that's going to make the next step be a lot easier. Start here with this outside one selected, then shift left click on them, and then ending with the original main blast shield selected. Control J to join them all together. Let's go into wireframe mode here, go into edit mode. Now we got to start merging vertices together. So let's start with the ones we overlapped. Press M, choose its center, and repeat that process along the lines, making sure when you do a box select that you don't accidentally select extra vertices. Now we need to join other relevant vertices. So for example, here looking down from the top, this guy's got to be merged here, and then the front corner's got to be merged with the front, and then something similar along the bottom. So I got to click here in this vertice, shift left click on that one, choose M for merge, but this time, well, we can choose that center, that's fine. And then repeat this process for the other 5 vertices that intersect this particular blast shield segment. If I jump to solid mode, you can see now they look like they're one solid object. They're almost there. One more thing we got to do in a moment. So I want to repeat that process for the remaining 2 blast shields. So I said there's one more step we have to do to make them one solid object. And just like before when we did the mirror modifier, we had those interior faces. Because of how we merged the vertices together, we got some more interior faces that need to be removed. So let's do that now. We're going to jump into wireframe mode, go over to face select in the upper left hand corner. And these little dots right here, these little black dots are how you select a face. You can see how that one's one that's inside between the 2 segments. That's an interior face. It has to be deleted. Press X, choose delete faces, repeat the process for the one next to it, and there should be 2 of those to reach these intersection points. So what we've got here is something that's looking pretty close to the final piece that I wanted to create, but of course it's only half of it. So to create the other half, well, we got to do another mirror modifier. So with the whole thing selected, go to the modifiers properties over here on the right. We're going to choose mirror again, and for the most part we should get something that looks pretty close to what we want. Now my reference image is in the way. Let me shuffle that over to the side. But once again, there's that tiny little gap in the middle because of how I placed things initially. So we're going to choose clipping, merge limit. We'll change that to 0.1. And in fact, that actually just solved it all together, which, hey, that works too. Now hit apply for the mirror modifier, and we have pretty close to 1 complete blast shield here. But once again, there's interior faces in there. So let's jump to wireframe mode. We're going to go to tab to edit mode, go into face select mode in the upper right hand corner, and play hunt for the tiny black dot that corresponds to the 2 faces we need to remove. There's one of them. Press X, choose faces, and there should be one more here. Nope. There we go. So that little dot should be roughly in the middle of the face, if that, well, helps at all. Press X one more time, delete it, And now we've got a complete solid object. Except I forgot one little detail I want to add, which is this extra little detail on the top of the blast shields. I'm just going to add that really quickly. It's going to be one more cube, resize, put it around, join stuff, everything we've done so far. And well, I'd say that looks pretty good to what I was thinking it might look like. If you want to change the angles, you can. It's kind of up to you. But hey, this will work pretty good. Let me send this over to my slicer program and we'll 3D print it up. Oh yeah, just because you should always do it and I forgot to tell you to do it. Let's go into edit mode one more time. Have everything selected and press Shift N and then export to your slicer programs just to fix up any weird anomalies from various Blender math operations. Well, there you go. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. Now, if you want to get adventurous and do a little bit of extra credit, you have everything you need between this tutorial and the previous one to build this defensive barrier right here that I actually printed up with a resin printer, so it looks a lot nicer. But like I said, you can cheat and head over to my Etsy store, link in the show notes, to pick up not only the STL files for this barrier, but for all the pipe segments I showed off in the first episode in this series. So with that, once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Thank you guys all for watching. And, you know, I would tell you to go hit subscribe, which you probably already know how to do that. But coming up, as usual, we got more parts of this series. Miniature painting. I actually don't have any of the mechs right here, but I did paint up these Warcaster miniatures a while back on this channel. And, of course, combat robotics. My ant weight's coming along pretty good. And this is quite a few steps along the process and what the last video was about. And yes, this process also deals a lot with Blender because I'm some weirdo who makes combat robots using Blender. Alright guys, have a great week.